The Meridian Empire had never once been told no, and so it did not know the shape of the word when it finally arrived. Magistrate Oru Sel of the Ninth Perception Court stood on the observation tier of the throne fortress Unbending Crown and watched the human ship cross the last 6 light minutes of empty space toward the largest fleet ever assembled under one sky. There were 11,000 Meridian warships arranged in 9 perfect rings around the fortress. The smallest of them was 4 kilometers long. The largest was a city that had been taught to kill. And against all of that came one gray vessel, alone, unhurried, not even running its weapons hot. Oru Sel had served the Empire for 240 years. He had watched 4 civilizations be talked out of existence. He knew, the way he knew the 4 chambers of his own heart, exactly how this would go. He had read the file the clerks assembled on the human ship over the 4 days of its approach. It was a thin file, which was itself unusual because the Empire kept thick files on everything. The humans had never warred with the Meridian Empire. They had never even traded with it. They lived a long way out, on a small blue world the survey had catalogued 900 years ago and marked unremarkable, a single inhabited planet with a few dozen colonies scattered around nearby stars, a minor people of no consequence who had somehow, in those 900 years, never been worth the cost of breaking. The Empire broke peoples on a schedule, the way a farmer harvests fields, and the human fields had always been too far out and too poor to be worth the trip. So the file was thin, a blue world, some colonies, a small fleet of gray ships that the survey had measured once, found unimpressive, and never measured again. That was the file. Oru Sel had read it 3 times during the approach, and each time it had told him the humans were nothing, and each time against the file, the thin, cold feeling in his chest had grown a little, because the file did not explain why a people of no consequence would answer a demand to kneel by sending one ship, alone, unhurried, to the largest fleet ever assembled, and would do it while speaking of manners. A thin file was supposed to mean a small enemy. Oru Sel had served too long to trust it. In his experience, the thinnest files belonged either to the peoples who truly were nothing, or to the peoples who had spent a very long time and a very great deal of care making certain that the Empire's surveyors found nothing worth writing down. He did not yet know which kind the humans were. He suspected, with the part of him that had kept him alive through 2 centuries of court, that he was about to find out, and that the finding out would not be gentle on anyone in the room. The throne fortress itself was the proof of the Empire's certainty. It was 60 kilometers from end to end, a continent of dark metal that did not move so much as preside, and it had hung above the Meridian throne world for 900 years without once being threatened, because nothing in the galaxy had ever come close enough to threaten it. Its lower tiers held the perception engines, the great living core of the Veil, and its upper tiers held the court, 1,100 officials in 9 rising rings of polished stone, and at its crown was the observation tier, where Oru Sel now stood, a curved wall of clear material a kilometer across, through which the whole of the assembled fleet could be seen at once, 11,000 ships laid out in the dark like a field of cold stars. It had been built to overawe. It overawed. Every people brought before it had looked up at it and understood, in their bodies, before a word was spoken, that they had already lost. That was its purpose. It was a machine for making the strong feel small, and it had never failed. The Meridian way of war was not fire. Fire was crude. Fire was what lesser species used because they had never learned the deeper craft. The Meridian Empire conquered with perception. Its great instrument, the Veil, reached into the minds of an enemy crew and edited what they believed to be real. It made a fleet see its own ships burning that had not been touched. It made gunners watch their captains turn to vapor and freeze at their stations weeping. It made whole worlds surrender to armies that were not there, because the people on those worlds could no longer tell the difference between the war they feared and the war that was happening. In 400 years, the Veil had broken 600 species, and not one of them had ever landed a single shot before they knelt. That was why the 11,000 ships did not fire now. They did not need to. The veil was already reaching out across the dark toward the single gray hull, already searching for the minds inside it, already preparing to show those minds whatever horror would make them turn around. Orusel had run the veil himself, in his younger years, before he rose to the bench of the perception court, and he remembered what it felt like to break a people. You did not feel like a soldier. You felt like a tide. The enemy crew opened before you, mind by mind, and you reached in and found the thing each of them was most afraid of, and you made them see it, and then you watched the fight go out of them the way water goes out of a wrung cloth. It was clean. There was no blood, usually, and no wreck, and afterward the broken world went on existing, catalogued and quiet, paying its tribute, and the empire grew by one more entry in the register. He had been proud of it, once. The veil was the reason the Meridian Empire was, in its own telling, the most civilized power in the history of the galaxy, the only conqueror that did not need to burn what it took. He was old enough now to have stopped telling himself that. A leash was a leash whether it drew blood or not, and a mind that had been reached into and rearranged was not a free mind afterward, no matter how undamaged its body. He had stopped running the veil 30 years ago and asked for the bench instead, and he had told himself it was age, and it had not been age. But he had never said so, because in the Meridian Court you did not say such things, and the veil hummed under the floor of every room, and you never quite knew, even now, even at his rank, whether the thought in your head was your own, or one the instrument had left there to keep you loyal. That was the last cruelty of the veil, the one its keepers never admitted. After 2,000 years, no Meridian could be entirely certain which of their convictions were theirs. The human ship was called the Last Courtesy. Orusel had the name from the registry his clerks had pulled. It was a strange name for a warship, and it troubled him in a way he could not yet explain. It did not boast. It did not threaten. It sounded almost like an apology offered before something unpleasant, the kind of thing one said to a guest before correcting them. The Empire had sent its demand 4 days earlier, in the high formal tongue, on every band the humans could possibly receive. Kneel. Surrender your homeworld, your colonies, your fleet, and your names to the Meridian Register, and you will be permitted to exist as a catalogued people. Refuse, and the veil will show your species what refusal costs, and you will kneel anyway, only weeping. Every species that had ever received that message had answered with terror, or with pleading, or with a long silence that was its own kind of answer. The humans had answered with one line. The clerks had read it aloud in the perception court, and the whole court had gone quiet, not from fear but from confusion, because no one understood it. The human reply had said only this: "We accept your invitation. We are bringing one ship, because we did not want to be rude and bring more than we needed." Orusel had ordered the line read 3 times. He had assumed it was a translation error. Now, watching the gray ship come on alone against 11,000, he was no longer sure it was an error at all, and that uncertainty sat in his chest like a swallowed stone. The fortress mind opened the veil. He felt it happen the way one feels a great machine come awake under the floor, a pressure that was not sound. 11,000 ships, and the throne fortress itself poured their perception into a single instrument and aimed it at the Last Courtesy. The veil had never been used at this strength against one target. It was an obscene amount of force, like drowning a single swimmer under the weight of an entire ocean. The court had argued it was wasteful. The Emperor's voice had decided it was a lesson. 600 species had knelt one at a time. This time the lesson would be performed for the whole galaxy at once, recorded on every band, so that the watching worlds would understand forever what it meant to be told to kneel by the Meridian Empire. Orusel leaned toward the great window and waited to watch a human crew lose its mind. The veil touched the gray ship, and the gray ship did something that no species had done in 400 years of war. It did not scream, it did not turn, it did not show the smallest flicker of fear. It answered the veil. A single narrow band of light pulsed once from the Last Courtesy, gentle as a held breath, and it carried not a weapon and not a plea but a message, and the message was addressed by name to the throne fortress and to Magistrate Orusel personally, which should not have been possible, because the humans could not have known he was aboard. The message was 4 words long. "Thank you for waiting." And then, on every screen in the perception court, the watching empire saw the thing it had come to laugh at do the one thing the veil could not edit, the one thing it had no power over, the one expression in all the galaxy the Meridian instrument had never once recorded on the face of an enemy. The humans, all of them, every face on the bridge of the single gray ship surrounded by 11,000, only smiled. A smile, in the Meridian understanding, was a baring of the teeth, and a baring of the teeth was a threat, and a threat from a creature that should be drowning in terror was a thing the magistrate's mind refused to hold for a moment. Then the moment passed, and he had to hold it anyway. The fortress mind reported the veil was engaged at full depth. 11,000 ships, the throne fortress, every perception engine the Empire owned, all of it focused on one hull. The instrument said it had reached the human minds. The instrument said it was inside, and the instrument said, in the flat way that machines have when they are describing something they cannot explain, that the human minds were not responding to the edit. Orusel had never read those words on a report in his life. Not responding to the edit. Every mind responded to the edit. That was the entire science of the veil, 2,000 years of it. A mind shown a false ship burning believed the ship was burning. A mind shown its own death flinched from its own death. This was not a matter of courage. The bravest soldier of the bravest species still saw what the veil told him to see, because seeing happened before courage, underneath it, in a place no will could reach. You could not be brave about a thing you did not know was a lie. The humans knew it was a lie. That was the only explanation, and it was an impossible one. They were looking straight into the strongest perception attack ever assembled, and they could tell, somehow, exactly which part of what they saw was the Empire lying to them, and they had simply declined to believe it. "Increased depth," said the voice of the court, a tall, pale official who spoke for the Emperor in this place. "They are shielding. Burn through the shield." The fortress mind increased depth. Orusel felt the pressure under the floor double, then double again. The veil, at this intensity, could make a planet's entire population see a second sun in the sky and trust it more than the real one. It poured all of that into the last courtesy. On the screens, the gray ship adjusted its heading by 1/2 degree and kept coming. A junior reader near the magistrate made a small sound, a wet click of distress, and put a hand against the wall. Orusel understood why. To run the veil was to be partly inside the mind you were editing, to feel the shape of its fear as you sculpted it. The reader had reached into the human ship, expecting to find terror to work with, the way a sculptor expects to find clay. He had found something else. Orusel, who had run the veil himself in his younger years, leaned into the same channel for one breath, to feel it for himself, and then pulled back, and did not lean in again. There was no fear in the human ship. There was no clay. There was only a great, calm, patient certainty, like the inside of a bell after it has been struck, and woven all through it, unhurried, was something the Meridian language had no clean word for, because the Empire had never needed one. The nearest word was the one used for an old craftsman watching a confident young fool pick up a tool he did not know how to hold. And there was one more thing, which Orusel felt only for the single breath he allowed himself in the channel, and which he did not report to the court, because he did not have the words, and because the words he did have would have emptied the room. The human minds were not surprised. That was the heart of it. A people meeting the veil for the first time was always surprised, even if it was not afraid, even if it was brave, because the veil was a thing no one expected, a hand in a place no one had ever felt a hand before. The humans were not surprised. They had felt it before. Not this exact instrument, perhaps, but the shape of it, the reaching, the lie laid over the senses. They knew the shape of it the way a man knows the shape of an old injury, and they had been waiting, with the patience of people who had decided long ago what they would do when the reaching came, for the reaching to come. It came. They did what they had decided, and they were not surprised, and that absence of surprise was, to Orusel, the most frightening single fact in the whole encounter, more frightening than the gray fleet he had not yet seen, because it meant the humans had not stumbled into this. They had planned it. They had known the Empire would point the veil at them, had perhaps arranged to be pointed at, had crossed 6 light minutes alone, precisely so that the Empire would empty its great instrument into them in front of the watching galaxy, and they had walked into the strongest cruelty ever built, the way a man walks into a familiar dark room, reaching at once for the switch he already knew was on the wall. The humans were not afraid of the veil. The humans were watching the Empire use the veil, and they were waiting, politely, for it to be finished. Magistrate. The voice had turned to him. The whole court was turning to him, 1,100 officials in their tiers, because Orusel was the senior perception authority in this fleet, and the instrument had failed, and someone had to be the one who knew. Why is it not working? He chose his words the way a man chooses where to step on cracking ice. The instrument is working, he said. It is reaching their minds. It is delivering the edit. They are receiving everything we send. He paused. They are simply not deceived by it. They are sorting the false from the true, faster than we can make the false. I have never seen a mind do this. I do not yet know how they do it. Then they will be the first to die not knowing they have lost, said the voice, and gave the order the court had come for, the order to open fire, 11,000 ships at once, to bury the impudent gray hull under more raw destruction than had been spent in any battle of the modern age. The order went out. The fleet did not fire. Orusel saw it on the ring displays, ship after ship reporting the same thing in the same flat machine voice. Firing solution will not resolve. Targeting cannot acquire. The weapons of 11,000 Meridian warships, every one of them locked and ready, could not find the last courtesy to shoot it, because the targeting systems of the Meridian fleet ran on perception, on sensors that built a picture of the battlefield and showed the gunners where to aim, and the picture was no longer the Empire's to control. The humans had taken it. It happened so quietly that the court did not understand for several seconds. There was no flash, no surge, no weapon discharge. The last courtesy simply reached back up the same channels the veil had opened to attack it, the 11,000 open doors the Empire had kicked into the human ship, and it walked through all of them at once, backward, into the perception systems of the entire Meridian fleet. The Empire had spent 2,000 years learning to edit what an enemy saw. It had built its whole war around opening the enemy's mind and rearranging the furniture, and it had never once imagined that the enemy might walk in through the open door and rearrange the Empire's. On the ring displays, the gray ship vanished from 11,000 targeting screens, not because it cloaked, because it asked the screens, gently, to stop showing it, and the screens, which were Meridian screens running on the veil's own architecture, agreed. "Where is it?" the voice said. "Where is the ship?" "It is exactly where it was," Orusel said quietly. 6 light minutes out and closing. We simply cannot see it anymore. Neither can the fleet. Make the fleet see it. Voice. He kept his tone level, because panic in the senior perception authority would unmake the court in a breath. The fleet sees what the veil tells it to see. We aimed the veil at them. They are standing inside it now. Whatever they tell the veil to show, the fleet will see. I do not control the instrument. I have not controlled it since the 3rd second. The court was silent. 1,100 officials in 9 tiers, and the only sound was the soft running hum of the fortress, and somewhere below, the wet click of the junior reader, still pressed against the wall, breathing wrong. Then the human ship spoke to them, and it spoke in perfect high meridian, the formal conqueror's tongue that no outsider was permitted to learn, that took a meridian child 40 years to master, and it spoke it without a single flaw of accent or grammar, which meant the humans had learned the Empire's most sacred private language and had simply chosen, until this moment, not to let the Empire know. "Officials of the Meridian Court," the last courtesy said, in the voice of a calm woman speaking slowly so as to be understood, "thank you for your invitation and for waiting while you tried your instrument on us. We wanted to let you finish. it would have been discourteous to interrupt. Oru-Sel closed his eyes for one breath. The courtesy of it was worse than any threat. A threat he could have understood. This was something else. This was a more powerful people being patient with a weaker one. And the Meridian Empire had been the more powerful people in every room it had ever entered for 2,000 years, and it knew exactly, from the inside, what that patience meant. It meant the other party had already counted the room and found it harmless. "You have spent 400 years," the voice went on, "perfecting a weapon that edits what a mind believes is real. It is genuinely a remarkable instrument. We have studied it for a long time. We received your broadcasts from the 600 worlds you broke, and we watched, and we learned what you do and how you do it, and we decided, some while ago, that we could not allow you to do it to anyone else." A pause. "We did not come here to argue with you about that. We came because you invited us, and because it is better, where it can be managed, to say a thing to a people's face." The voice of the court drew itself up, and Oru-Sel saw it summon the last of the Empire's certainty, the certainty that had never been wrong in 2,000 years. "You are one ship," the voice said. "You are surrounded by 11,000. You have blinded our targeting. Very well, a clever trick. But a trick is not a victory. We have other ways to kill that do not need the veil. The instant we close the range, you are debris." "Yes," the last courtesy agreed, pleasantly. "If we were one ship, that would be true. I should explain the small misunderstanding, because I think it is the root of all of this, and I would not want you to make a decision based on bad information. You believe you are surrounded by no one, and surrounding one ship." Another pause, and Oru-Sel felt the whole court lean toward the screens without meaning to. "It is the other way around." And then the Empire saw. Not because anything arrived, because the veil, which the humans now held, stopped hiding something it had been hiding all along, and let the Meridian fleet see what had been in the dark around them, since before the demand was ever sent. There were ships out there. Gray ships, the same patient gray as the last courtesy. Hull after hull after hull resolving out of the empty space beyond the 9th ring, where the Empire's own sensors had reported nothing for 4 days. They had been there the whole time. They had crossed into Meridian space behind the fleet, around it, through the spaces the veil-blinded sensors swore were empty, and they had simply waited, dark and silent, while the Empire arranged its 11,000 ships in 9 beautiful rings around a single decoy that had walked in alone to hold the court's attention. For 4 days the Empire's sensors had reported empty space beyond the 9th ring. Oru-Sel had read those reports himself. Every watch, the long clean columns of nothing, system after system swept and found vacant out to the limit of the survey. He had trusted them. The whole court had trusted them. They were the most sensitive sensors the Empire owned, and they ran, like everything, on the Veil's architecture, on the perception engines that built the Empire's picture of the dark. And that, he understood now, with the slow horror of a man watching the floor of his own house become water, was exactly the flaw. The sensors did not see. The sensors perceived the way a mind perceives and built a picture, and the humans held the picture. They had not crept past the Empire's sensors. They had not jammed them or fooled them with decoys. They had simply reached into the perception engines 4 days ago, the moment the demand to kneel went out, and asked the engines, gently, to report empty space where the Gray Fleet was. And the engines, being Meridian engines, had agreed, and had gone on reporting clean columns of nothing, while a fleet larger than the Empire's settled into the dark around the throne fortress and waited. The Empire had spent 4 days arranging its 11,000 ships into 9 perfect rings, certain it was alone, performing a siege of 1 decoy for an audience of empty space. And the empty space had been full the entire time, and the fullness had been hidden by the Empire's own eyes, turned against it by the people it had told to kneel. Oru-Sel counted on the display before he could stop himself. The number kept climbing. It passed the 11,000 of the Meridian fleet and did not slow. It passed 2 of them. It passed 3. "How many?" the voice whispered, and for the first time in the magistrate's 240 years, the voice of the Emperor sounded like a frightened man. They are still appearing, Orusale said. His own voice was very far away. I have counted past 30,000. I do not believe they have shown us all of them yet. I believe they are letting us count, slowly, on purpose, so that we understand. The last courtesy spoke once more, and there was no cruelty in it, which was the most terrible thing about it. This is the Greywater line of the Terran fleet, it said. We are the people you told to kneel. We brought one ship to your court, as we promised, because manners matter, and we did not want to crowd you while we talked. The rest waited outside, as guests do. They will not be needed unless you make them needed. A pause, gentle as a hand on a shoulder. We would very much prefer they are not needed. We have no quarrel with your crews. We have a quarrel with what your empire does to other people's minds, and we have come to end the doing of it, and that is a different thing entirely from wanting your sailors dead. The junior reader against the wall began, very quietly, to laugh, the broken laugh of a mind that has understood something too large for it, and two senior officials took him by the arms and led him out, and no one in the court reproached them, because every one of them wanted to laugh in exactly that way and had not yet given themselves permission. The voice tried, then, the thing that 2,000 years of empire had taught it to try, when a strong opponent revealed its strength. It tried to make a deal. It was the reflex of every power that has ever been cornered, to reach past the fear and find the price, because everyone had a price, and the Meridian Empire had spent 2,000 years buying loyalty and silence and surrender with the things it had to offer, with tribute and rank and the promise to spare what it could destroy. You have made your point, the voice said, and Orusale heard it gather its old certainty around the words like a robe. You are stronger than we knew. Very well. The Empire does not insist on the impossible. Let us speak as powers, then, you and I. We have 600 worlds in the register, 600 peoples and all their wealth, the accumulated tribute of 2,000 years. Take a share of it. Take the richest 100 worlds and rule them as you like, with our blessing, and let the Empire keep the rest, and we will call you allies, partners, the second power of the galaxy, and there will be peace between us, and you will be wealthy beyond the counting of it. No people has ever been offered so much. Name your share. It is yours. There was a silence from the gray ship. Orusale held his breath, because for the length of that silence he did not know what the humans would say, and the not knowing was the first time in the encounter the humans had been unreadable. When the last courtesy answered, its voice had changed, only slightly, and the change was the most frightening thing it had done yet, because for the first time there was something in it that was not patient. It was not anger. It was something colder and sadder than anger, the tone of a person who has been offered a thing so wrong that the offering itself is a kind of confession. You have just offered us 100 conquered worlds, the human ship said slowly, as if they were yours to give, as if the peoples on them were furniture, to be handed from one owner to another. You have been beaten, completely, by a people who came to free those worlds from exactly that, and your answer is to offer us a share of the stolen, as though we might want it, as though everyone wants the same thing you want, and only the size of the share is in question. A pause. Magistrate Orusale, you are listening, I know. I want you to mark this moment. This is the thing we came to end, not the weapon. The weapon is only how. This, the belief, all the way down in the bones of your empire, that worlds and peoples are property, that strength is ownership, that the only question between powers is how to divide the owned. There is no share of that we will take. There is no share of it that exists. The 100 worlds are not yours to offer because they were never yours. They are their own. They always were. We have come a very long way to say that out loud, in your court, on every band, so that the worlds themselves hear it said. The voice settled back toward its patience, but the cold stayed under it. Do not offer us a share again. There is nothing you own that we want, because you do not, in truth, own anything at all. The voice did not answer. It had nothing left to answer with. It had reached for the oldest reflex of empire, the price that buys peace, and it had found that the people across from it did not believe in the currency, did not believe peoples could be bought or sold or shared, and a power that does not believe in your currency cannot be bought, and a power that cannot be bought cannot be managed, and a power that cannot be managed and is stronger than you is the one thing 2,000 years of empire had never prepared the court to face. Orusehol stood at the great window and looked out at the gray ships that filled the dark in every direction, more of them than the empire had ships, and he understood at last why the human reply had troubled him 4 days ago. We are bringing one ship, because we did not want to be rude and bring more than we needed. It had not been a boast, and it had not been an error. It had been the literal, exact, courteous truth. They had brought one ship into the court. They had simply also brought a fleet to wait politely outside the door, in case the court forgot its manners. They mean to take the veil, said the voice, gathering itself. We will not let them have it. The instrument is the empire. Burn the fortress before we surrender it. Set the self-destruct. If they want it, they will have ash. Voice, Orusehol said, and now he turned fully from the window to face the court, because this, at last, was a thing he could be certain of, and the court needed someone certain. The self-destruct is a system. It runs on the fortress mind. The fortress mind runs on the veil. They are inside the veil. There is no command in this fortress that does not pass through a system they now hold. He let that settle. We cannot burn the instrument. We could not so much as dim a light in this hall without their permission. They have not taken our weapons. They have taken our hands. He watched the understanding move across 1,100 faces in 9 tiers, the slow, terrible arrival of a fact that 2,000 years had made unthinkable. The Meridian Empire, which had broken 600 species by editing what they believed was real, was now standing inside its own greatest weapon, looking out through a window at a fleet it could not count, holding controls that no longer answered, and it was about to learn, all at once, every lesson it had spent 4 centuries teaching to everyone else. What do they want? The voice said at last, and it was no longer a demand, it was a question, and the asking of it was the first true defeat the empire had ever suffered, more total than any battle, because a power that asks what its enemy wants has already conceded that the enemy will be the one to decide. The last courtesy answered, and the gray fleet outside did not move, and not one shot had yet been fired by either side, and Magistrate Orusehol, watching, finally understood what the human name meant. The last courtesy was the one you offered a thing that had been powerful, before you took its power away. It was the warning you gave for the sake of your own conscience, knowing it would not be heeded, so that afterward you could say you had given it. The humans had named their ship for the kindness they intended to show the empire, and the kindness was this. They were going to explain, slowly and clearly and in the empire's own sacred tongue, exactly what was about to happen, so that no one in the Meridian Court would ever again be able to tell themselves they had not understood. What they wanted, the last courtesy explained, was simple, and the simplicity of it was the cruelest part. They wanted the veil to stop, not the fleet, not the empire's worlds, not its sailors or its officials, or its long history, only the instrument. Only the one thing the Meridian Empire had ever used to win, the perception weapon that reached into a mind and rewrote what it believed. The humans wanted it switched off, everywhere, forever, and they wanted the Empire to switch it off itself, with its own hands, while the gray fleet watched. You ask us to disarm, the voice said, willingly, in front of you. We ask the Empire to stop doing the one thing the galaxy cannot forgive it for, the human voice answered. You may keep your guns. Guns we understand. Every people has guns. We have rather a lot of guns ourselves, as you can see. What we cannot allow to continue is a weapon that takes a mind's own senses and turns them into a leash. We have met it now. We know what it is. We are not willing to share a galaxy with it. Magistrate Orusehol, listening, felt the trap close, and admired it the way a doomed swordsman admires the cut that has already opened him. The humans were not demanding the Empire's surrender. If they had, the Empire could have refused and died defiant, and called itself unbroken. They were demanding only that the Empire give up the thing that made it the Empire, and they were offering, in exchange, to let it keep everything else: its fleet, its worlds, its sailors, its pride. It was the offer one made to a power one did not fear, the magnanimous, unbearable offer of the genuinely stronger party, and refusing it would not look like defiance. It would look like a tantrum. The voice refused it anyway, because 2,000 years cannot turn around in an hour. "No," the voice said. "The veil is the Empire. We will not put it out at the word of a stranger. We have 11,000 ships. We have guns, as you say. The instant we find a firing solution, you learn that guns are enough." "You will not find a firing solution," the last courtesy said, with the patience of someone explaining tide to a child who has decided to argue with the sea. "But I understand that you must try, and that you cannot believe me until you have tried, and that the trying is the only way you will come to believe. So please, try. We will wait. We have been very patient already, and we can be patient a little longer." The voice gave the order. The Empire tried. It tried for 9 minutes, and Orusel stood at the window and watched it fail in 9 different ways, and each failure was gentler than it had any right to be, which was how he knew, finally and completely, the size of the thing they faced. The fleet attempted to restore its targeting by routing around the veil, falling back to the old optical sensors that simply pointed a lens at the dark and looked. The optical sensors worked perfectly. They showed 11,000 meridian ships, and beyond the 9th ring, a wall of gray hulls that the count had now passed 40,000. And then, very softly, the gray hulls in the optical view began to drift, all of them, by a hair, so that every firing solution the gunners built was wrong by exactly the width of a hull, and every shot, had it been fired, would have passed cleanly between 2 human ships and into the empty dark beyond. The humans were not hiding from the optics. They were letting the Empire see them, and quietly correcting the aim, so that the Empire could shoot all day and hit nothing, and would have to watch itself miss, over and over, and understand that the missing was a choice the humans were making and could stop making whenever they liked. A gunnery officer of the 2nd ring, unwilling to trust the corrected solutions, ordered his ship to fire on raw optics alone, by eye, the oldest method there was, a sailor sighting down the length of his own weapon at a hull he could plainly see. The officer was a veteran of 40 years. He had killed by eye before the veil was fitted to his ship. He aimed at the nearest gray hull, a vessel the size of a small moon hanging clear and bright in his optical view, and he fired, a single heavy round, the first shot of the entire confrontation, and the court held its breath. The round crossed the distance true. Orusel tracked it on the board. It was a good shot, a veteran's shot, and it ran straight at the gray hull, and it would have struck it square amidships, and at the last instant, the gray hull was simply somewhere else, a quarter length to the left, having moved without seeming to move. The way a fish is suddenly a hand's width from where your grasp closes, and the round passed through the space where the hull had been and went on into the dark. And the gray fleet did not fire back, did not so much as turn a gun toward the ship that had shot at it, and the silence of that was worse than any answer. The humans had let the Empire take its one honest shot, by eye, with no perception trick to blame, so that the Empire would see with its own veteran's eyes that even a perfect shot would not land, and then they had declined to punish it, and the not punishing said, "You may shoot at us as much as you need to. We understand. Tell us when you are finished." A flotilla of the inner ring, 200 of the Empire's fastest cruisers, broke formation and ran for the gray fleet at full burn, meaning to close the range until even a corrected solution could not miss, to die against the human hulls if that was what it took to land one honest shot. Orusel watched them go and felt something that was almost pride. It was the bravest thing the Empire had done in his lifetime. The 200 cruisers crossed half the distance, and then the gray fleet opened, the way a crowd opens for someone walking through it, a single clean lane appearing in the wall of hulls, and the 200 cruisers ran straight down the lane at full speed and out the far side into open space. Having passed entirely through the human fleet without a shot fired by anyone, and when they tried to turn and come back, the lane was simply gone, the hulls closed up smooth as water, and the 200 cruisers found themselves alone on the wrong side of the galaxy's largest fleet, having been let through like guests shown out a side door. The Empire tried to call for reinforcement. It reached for the great relay that bound the Meridian worlds together, to summon the home fleets, the reserve, the deep garrisons. The relay was a perception system. It carried thought across the Empire faster than light, by editing what distant minds believed they had received. The humans held it. The call for reinforcement went out, and the human voice did not block it, did not jam it, did nothing so crude. It simply let the call arrive at every Meridian world exactly as sent, and then, riding behind it on the same channel, it let arrive a second message, in the high formal tongue, addressed to every commander in the Empire, that said only this: "The Greywater line of the Terran fleet is presently in conference with your court above the throne fortress. No ship of yours has been harmed. No world of yours is in danger. We ask you to remain where you are. If you come, you will not be fired upon, but you will be shown what your court is being shown, and we would rather you heard it from your own court afterward, in your own words, than from us. The choice is yours, and we will respect it." Not one reinforcement came. Across 40 Meridian systems, commanders read the two messages side by side, the Empire's call for help and the human request for calm, and they did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic was a fleet larger than the Empire's that had so far harmed no one, and they stayed where they were. The humans had not silenced the Empire's cry for help. They had let it be heard and answered it themselves, more honestly than the Empire had, and the Empire's own worlds had believed the honest voice. It was the Veil's exact logic, the conquest of a mind by what it chose to believe, and the humans had used it without telling a single lie, which the Veil had never once managed in 2,000 years. There was a moment, near the end of those 9 minutes, that Orusel would remember as the one in which he stopped being afraid and started, against everything, to feel something nearer to relief, though he could not have said so aloud in that room. A young signals officer at the base of the court, barely past her training, had been weeping quietly at her station, certain the fleet was about to be annihilated, certain the gray ships were only waiting for some signal to open fire and turn 11,000 Meridian hulls into an expanding cloud of light. She had seen the recordings of the broken worlds. She knew what the strong did to the weak, because she had been raised inside an empire that did it on a schedule, and she had assumed, as any Meridian would, that the humans were simply a stronger version of the same hunger. And the humans had not fired, minute after minute, with every advantage, with the targeting in their hands and the relays in their hands, and a fleet that outnumbered the empires. They had not fired, had not killed, had not even frightened anyone they did not have to frighten. The young officer stopped weeping somewhere in the 7th minute, not because she had been comforted, but because the thing she was braced for kept not happening, and a mind cannot stay braced forever against a blow that does not fall. Orusel watched her face change, watched the terror in it give way slowly to a kind of baffled, exhausted wonder, the look of a creature that has been certain of its own death, and has been, instead, spared, again and again, by a hand that could end it whenever it chose, and keeps choosing not to. He had seen that look before. He had seen it on the faces of the worlds the Empire spared the killing use, and merely catalogued, the grateful broken look of the conquered. He had never once seen it on a Meridian face, looking outward, at someone stronger. That was the 9th minute, and at the end of it, the voice of the court sat down. It simply sat, on the floor of the high tier, in its pale robes, the way a man sits when his legs have stopped agreeing to hold him, and the 1,100 officials of the perception court looked at the voice of the emperor sitting on the floor and understood that the thing they had built their lives around was over. Before the voice sat, in the last seconds of the 9th minute, the Empire made one final attempt, and it was the most desperate and the most revealing of all, because it was an attempt to use the veil not on the humans but on its own people. A senior architect of the instrument, a woman named Hal Sun who had spent 90 years tuning the perception engines, reached for the fleet's own minds, the 11,000 Meridian crews, and tried to edit what they saw, to show the Empire's own sailors a false picture in which the Grey Fleet was burning, in which the human ship was already dead, in which the Empire was winning, so that the fleet's morale would hold, and the sailors would keep fighting and not understand that they had already lost. It was a thing the Empire had done before, quietly, in long wars, to keep its own crews steady. The veil reached inward as easily as outward. Hale Sun was good at it, and she reached for the 11,000 Meridian crews to comfort them with a lie, and she found that she could not, because the humans held the veil, and the humans would not let the Empire lie even to itself, even to comfort its own frightened sailors. The last courtesy spoke to her directly, and there was something almost gentle in it, almost sorrowful. "No," it said, "not them either. You were about to show your own crews a victory that is not happening, to keep them fighting a battle they cannot win, so that more of them would die believing a lie you made. We will not allow it. Your sailors will see exactly what is true, the same as everyone else today. They have the right to know what is real. They have always had that right. You took it from them a long time ago, the same as you took it from everyone, and we are giving it back, to your own people first of all." A pause. "Let them see, let them decide what they think, with their own true eyes, the way a person should. You may find they are wiser than the court has ever let them be." And the 11,000 Meridian crews saw the truth, all of them, for the first time in their service. They saw the Grey Fleet whole and unharmed. They saw their own weapons fail to find it. They saw the human ship hold its fire minute after minute when it could have killed them all. And the strange thing, the thing Orusel learned only later from the reports, was that the crews did not break. They did not panic or mutiny or despair. They looked at the truth, all 11,000 of them, and a great many of them felt, under the fear, the same baffled relief the young signals officer had felt, the slow understanding that the thing across from them did not want them dead, and a quiet began to spread through the fleet, ship to ship, that was not the quiet of defeat, but something the Empire had no name for, the quiet of people who have been lied to their whole lives and are, for one strange hour, being told the truth. Oru Sehel crossed the tier and crouched beside the voice, old joints protesting, and spoke quietly, official to official, the two senior men of a falling court. "You wanted to know why it was not working," he said. "I have the answer now. I have been listening to them the whole time. Do you want it?" "Tell me," the voice said, to the floor. "The veil edits what a mind believes is real," Oru Sehel said. "We have always thought that meant it edits the mind. It does not. It edits the senses, the picture the senses build, and then it trusts the mind to believe its own senses, because every mind in the galaxy believes its own senses. That is the assumption the whole instrument rests on. 2,000 years, and we never questioned it, because we never met a people who did not believe their own eyes." He paused. "The humans do not believe their own eyes. Not fully. Not ever. They are a species that learned, somewhere far back, that their own senses lie to them, that the mind builds a false picture even with no enemy editing it, and so they grew up never trusting the picture all the way, always holding a small part of themselves back to ask, is this true? We aimed the most powerful sensory lie ever built at the one species in the galaxy that was already, by nature, in the habit of doubting what it saw. The veil reached their minds. It delivered the lie perfectly, and the humans looked at it, the way they look at everything, and quietly asked, is this true? And the answer came back no, and they set it aside, the way they have been setting aside false pictures since before they left their world. He shook his head slowly. We did not fail to reach them. We reached the one people in creation that cannot be reached this way. And we did it at full strength, in front of the entire galaxy, which they let us do, so that the entire galaxy would see it fail. The voice was quiet for a long moment. Then we never had a chance, it said. We had a chance, Orusel said, 4 days ago. When they sent the line about manners, we could have read it correctly. We could have understood that a people who promise to bring only one ship, out of courtesy, are a people who have so many ships that one is all they need, and so much certainty that they are thinking about our feelings while they say it. We could have answered that courtesy with our own, and stopped the veil ourselves, here, before they ever crossed the line, and kept our pride by giving it freely. He stood, his knees cracking. We read it as weakness. We have always read everything as weakness, because for 2,000 years everything was. That was our chance. We have already spent it. Above them both, the great window showed the gray fleet waiting in the dark, perfectly still, 40-some thousand hulls that had crossed an empire's defenses without firing, run a charge through their own ranks like water, answered a call for help more honestly than the help itself, and disarmed the largest fleet in galactic history without ending a single life. They were not even running their weapons hot. They had not needed to. They had brought guns, and shown the guns, and never once reached for them, because the showing had been enough, and the not reaching was itself the message. We could, and we are choosing not to, and you will live the rest of your lives knowing the difference was a courtesy. The last courtesy spoke again, into the quiet of the broken court, and its voice had not changed at all, was still the calm woman, speaking slowly to be understood, and Orusel realized it had never once been raised, from the first word to this one, because it had never once needed to be. You have tried for 9 minutes, it said, and you have seen that it does not work, and I am sorry it took the trying, but I understand that it had to. Now I will ask you one more time, and this time you will know the asking is real. Switch off the veil, with your own hands. We will give the hands back to you to do it. That is the only thing we will let you control again, the switch that turns it off, because we want it done by you and not by us, so that the galaxy sees the Meridian Empire chose to set the instrument down, and is not remembered only as the empire that had it taken away. A pause. We are offering you the chance to keep your honor. It is a real offer. We do not have to make it. Please understand that we are making it on purpose. The offer split the court in two, and the splitting nearly killed them all. There was a faction in the perception court that could not bear it. They were the keepers of the veil, the high readers and the architects of the instrument, men and women who had spent their whole lives serving the one thing that made the empire, and to them switching it off was not surrender, it was suicide, the deliberate ending of everything they were. Their leader was a tall reader, named Vesk Tor, the second voice of the court, after the voice itself, and Vesk Tor stood while the voice sat on the floor, and declared that he would not allow it. They cannot make us, Vesk Tor said, and his voice carried across the 9 tiers. They hold the systems, yes, but a system is a thing of channels and minds, and there is a deeper layer they cannot have reached. The core of the veil is not a machine, it is a chamber of living readers, 40 of our strongest, bound together at the center of this fortress, and they are the true instrument, and no human channel can walk into a living mind the way it walks into a sensor. If the 40 readers reach out together, with all the Empire's strength, at one human ship, the way we should have done from the start, instead of spreading it across the fleet, we may yet find the crack the others missed. Orusel turned cold, Vesk Tor. They reached the human minds at full strength, and were turned aside. The 40 readers will fare no better, and you will have spent them for nothing. They will fare better, Vesk Tor said, because the 40 will not try to deceive the humans. The humans cannot be deceived, you have shown me that, and I believe you, so the 40 will not lie to them. The 40 will simply reach into the human crew and stop their hearts. No false picture, no edit, only the oldest use of the veil, the one we abandoned because it was crude, the hand that reaches into a body and closes it. You cannot doubt your way out of a stopped heart, magistrate. Doubt all you like. Dead is dead. And there it was, the thing the humans had not accounted for, or so Vesk Tor believed. The veil had 2 uses. The famous one, the lie, edited what a mind perceived. The old one, the cruel one, set aside 2,000 years ago, as beneath the dignity of a civilized empire, reached past perception entirely and touched the body itself, the heart, the breath, the small electric rhythms that kept a creature alive, and stopped them. It did not need to be believed. It only needed to reach. Vesk Tor gave the order to the chamber of 40 before Orusel could stop him, before the voice could rise from the floor, and the 40 living readers at the heart of the throne fortress reached out together, with all the gathered strength of the Empire's strongest minds, not to deceive the human crew but to kill it, to close 40,000 human hearts at once across the Grey Fleet and end the conference with corpses. Orusel felt it leave the fortress, the old crude reaching, and he braced for the worst thing he had ever done to be done in his name. Nothing happened. The 40 readers reached, and the reaching went out across the dark toward the human hulls, and it arrived, and it touched the human crews, and it found, where 40,000 human hearts should have been, nothing to close. Not shielded hearts, not protected hearts, no hearts at all in the place the readers reached, because the place the readers reached was not where the humans were. The last courtesy explained it, gently, because it explained everything gently, and the gentleness was now the most frightening thing in the galaxy. That was unkind, Vesktor, it said, and the use of his name, which the humans should not have known, made the tall reader flinch. But we expected it. We have studied your instrument for a long time, and we found the old use, the killing use, in the records of the worlds you broke, and we did not come into your court without preparing for it. The crews you reached for are not aboard the ships you reached for. The Grey Fleet you see in the dark is real, every hull of it, but the minds that fly it are not inside it. They are far from here, somewhere your readers will never find, and the ships answer them across a distance your empire cannot measure, because we, too, can move a thought a long way, and unlike your veil, our way of doing it does not require us to lie to anyone. A pause. You reached out to stop 40,000 hearts. You found 40,000 empty ships flown by people who are nowhere near you. You spent the 40 readers, your last and strongest, on a fleet of beautiful gray gloves with no hands inside them. The hands are at home, the hands are safe, and the 40 readers are spent now, are they not? I can feel them gone. You had one move left and you have made it, and it has cost you the last strength the Empire had, and it has changed nothing, because we read your instrument long before you ever pointed it at us. Vesktor sat down. He did not sit the way the voice had sat, slowly, with dignity failing. He simply dropped, all at once, as if a string had been cut, and he stared at the floor of the high tier with the look of a man who has spent the last coin of a fortune he did not know was almost gone. Orusel crossed to him too, because someone had to, and crouched, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. The Empire had reached out to murder 40,000 strangers, and had failed even at that, had grasped at empty gloves, and the failing was so complete and so gentle that it left no room even for shame, only for a kind of vast quiet emptiness, the emptiness of a people who have just learned that everything they were afraid to lose was already lost, had been lost from the first moment, and that all their struggling had only been the slow discovery of a defeat that was finished before it began. And there was a deeper thing in it, which Orusel turned over slowly as he crouched beside the broken reader, a thing that frightened him more than the empty gloves. The humans had known the Empire would try the killing use. They had said so. We found the old use, the killing use, in the records of the worlds you broke, and we did not come into your court without preparing for it. That meant the humans had read the Empire's most buried records, the suppressed accounts of the early conquests, before the veil was made civilized, when it still reached into bodies and stopped hearts. Those records did not exist outside the Empire. They had been sealed 2,000 years ago, hidden even from most of the court, kept only in the deepest archive of the throne fortress itself, because the Empire was ashamed of them, because a civilized conqueror did not like to remember that it had begun by simply killing. The humans had read them. Somehow, across 900 years and a long dark distance, a minor people on a small blue world had got inside the Empire's most secret shame and read it, and had said nothing, and had filed it away, and had built their whole approach around the knowledge that when everything else failed, the Empire would reach, in its terror, for the buried killing use, the way a cornered animal reaches for the oldest tooth in its head. They had not just studied the veil, they had studied the Empire's heart, the part of it the Empire kept hidden from itself, and they understood it better than the court did, and they had prepared for the worst thing the Empire was capable of before the Empire itself remembered it was capable of it. That was not the knowledge of an enemy. It was the knowledge of a physician who has read the whole chart, every shameful page, and has come, unhurried, to set a bone the patient has been hiding for 2,000 years. Above them the great window showed the gray fleet, unmoved, unharmed, 40,000 empty gloves, flown by hands a galaxy away, and not one of them had so much as warmed a gun. The last courtesy waited. It let the quiet sit. It did not press. And in the waiting, Magistrate Orusel understood that the humans had built this entire encounter, every minute of it, around a single purpose, and the purpose was not conquest, and it was not revenge, though they had cause for both. The purpose was to make the Meridian Empire understand, all the way down, that it had been beaten, and that the beating had been merciful, and that the mercy had been a choice, and to make the Empire understand this so thoroughly that it would never again reach for the veil, never again be tempted, never again tell itself the humans had merely been lucky or that next time it would be different, because there would be no story it could tell itself in which the Grey Fleet had not held its fire while the Empire emptied every weapon it had into empty air. That was the courtesy, not the sparing of lives, though the lives were spared. The courtesy was the completeness. The humans were taking from the Empire not just its weapon but every future excuse, every comfortable lie it might one day tell about this day, leaving it nothing to hold but the bare, unbearable truth. We tried everything, and they let us, and nothing we did touched them, and at the end they asked us, politely, to put the weapon down, and the only honor left to us was in the pudding. The voice rose from the floor. It took a long time, and no one helped it, because helping would have been an insult, and the court, even now, even broken, understood insult. The voice stood, and straightened its pale robes, and looked up at the great window and the gray fleet beyond it, and then it spoke, not to the human ship, but to the court, to the 1,100 officials of the 9th Perception Court of the Meridian Empire, and its voice was steady. "They have offered us the switch," the voice said. "They have offered to give us back our hands for the length of one act, so that the deed is ours. I have served the veil for 300 years. I helped build the Chamber of 40 that is now dark. There is no part of me that wants to do this." It paused, and looked at Orusale, and at Vesktor on the floor, and back at the window. "But I have watched us spend 9 minutes and the last strength of the Empire trying to land one shot on a people who never raised a hand against us, and I have watched them answer every cruelty we offered with patience, and I have understood, finally, what kind of thing we are dealing with. We are dealing with a people who are stronger than us in every way that matters, and who do not want our worlds, and do not want our deaths, and want only that we stop doing the one thing for which the galaxy will never forgive us. They are right that the galaxy will never forgive it. They are right that it should stop, and they are giving us the chance to be the ones who stop it." The voice drew a long breath. "If we refuse, they will not kill us. That is the worst of it. They will simply stop the instrument themselves, gently, and leave us alive, and the galaxy will remember the Meridian Empire as the power that had to have its weapon taken away like a blade from a child. Or we may switch it off ourselves, now, with our own hands, and be remembered as the power that, when it was finally beaten by a better people, chose to set down the thing that should never have been built." K-quote. The voice looked at the court. "I know which of those I would rather we were, but I will not order it. After today, I do not think I have the right to order anything. I am asking." And the 9th Perception Court of the Meridian Empire, 1,100 officials in 9 tiers, who had never in 2,000 years been asked for anything by the voice of the Emperor, who had only ever been told, sat for a long moment in the unfamiliar weight of a choice that was truly theirs. Then, one by one, beginning with the lowest tier and rising, they stood. Standing was the old gesture of assent in the Meridian Court, used to confirm an emperor's decree, and it had not been used in living memory because decrees did not require confirmation. They required only obedience. They stood now, tier by tier, from the bottom of the hall to the top, until the whole court was on its feet, and the standing was not obedience, because no one had commanded it, and that was what made it the first free act the Meridian Court had performed in 2,000 years. Vesk Tor, last of all, pushed himself up from the floor of the high tier and stood with the rest, because he was the keeper of the veil, and if anyone had earned the right to refuse it was him, and his standing meant more than all the others. The voice turned to the great window. "We accept your offer," it said to the last courtesy. "Give us back our hands. We will switch it off ourselves." The humans gave the hands back exactly as promised, and not one thing more. Orusel watched it happen on the fortress board. A single control returned to Meridian authority. One switch, the master cut for the veil, the deep command that would silence every perception engine in the Empire at once, from the throne fortress to the smallest scout, the order that no commander in 2,000 years had ever been permitted to issue because it would have left the Empire defenseless. Everything else stayed in human hands, the targeting, the relays, the self-destruct, the doors. The humans had reached into the most controlled machine ever built and handed back precisely one button, the only one that mattered, the only one that could not be turned against anyone, and they had trusted the Empire to press it. The trust was itself a kind of message. It said, "We are not afraid of what you will do with your hands, because there is nothing you can do that we have not already accounted for." It was the confidence of a parent handing a child a single safe task in a kitchen full of knives the child cannot reach. The voice walked to the master control alone. The court watched. The gray fleet, a galaxy away in the dark, watched. And the voice of the Meridian Empire, with its own hand, on behalf of a people that had broken 600 species by editing what they believed was real, switched the veil off. It went out like a held breath let go. Orusel felt it leave him, the low pressure under the floor that had been there his whole life, the hum of the great instrument that every Meridian carried without knowing it, the faint, constant presence of the veil in the back of every Meridian mind, 2,000 years of it, gone in an instant, and the silence it left was so total that several officials cried out, and the junior reader who had been led away earlier, somewhere in the fortress, went abruptly and finally still. For the first time in the history of the Empire, every Meridian mind was alone inside itself, seeing only what its own eyes saw, with nothing reaching in, and the loneliness of it was vast, and underneath the loneliness, slowly, like warmth returning to a frozen limb, was something the Empire had not felt in 2,000 years and did not at first recognize. It was honesty, the simple condition of a mind that is no longer in the business of lying to others, and therefore no longer needs to lie to itself. "It is done," the voice said quietly. "It is done," the last courtesy agreed, and for the first time, very slightly, its voice warmed. "Thank you. I know what that cost. I want you to know that we know." And then the human ship did the thing that Orusel would carry to the end of his long life, the thing that no conqueror in the history of the galaxy had ever done, the thing that finally and completely answered the question of what kind of people the humans were. It began to leave. The gray hull of the last courtesy, alone at the center of the 9 rings, turned its nose away from the throne fortress, gently, and beyond the 9th ring, the 40,000 gray ships of the Greywater Line turned with it, all together, smooth as one body, and began to draw back into the dark from which they had come. They took nothing. They took no worlds, no ships, no prisoners, no tribute. They did not occupy the fortress. They did not garrison a single Meridian system. They did not demand a treaty, or a surrender, or a knee. They had come to switch off one weapon, and the weapon was off, and so they were going home. And the going was so calm and so complete that the perception court stood in stunned silence watching the largest fleet in galactic history simply leave, having conquered nothing, having killed no one, having taken only a single switch and pressed it with the Empire's own hand. "Wait," the voice said, and the word broke out of it before dignity could stop it. "You are leaving. You hold everything. You have the largest fleet that has ever existed, and you have beaten us completely, and you are simply leaving." "Yes," the last courtesy said. "Why?" The human ship paused in its turning, And when it answered the whole court, and it answered slowly, so as to be understood, and Orusel understood that this was the true last courtesy, the real one, the gift the ship had been named for all along. Because we are not you, it said. That is the whole of it, and it is not a small thing, and I want you to hear it clearly. You met a weaker people, and you took their worlds and their names and their minds, because you could, and because you had decided long ago that the strong take from the weak, and that this was simply the way of things. We are stronger than you were ever strong. We could take everything you have, today, with what is already in this sky, and there is nothing you could do to stop us, and we both know it now, all the way down. And we are choosing not to. Not because we are weak. You have seen that we are not weak. Because being able to take a thing has never once, for us, been the same as having the right to it. That is the difference between your people and mine, and it is the only difference that has ever mattered, and we have come a very long way to show it to you, because we thought that someone ought to, at least once, in a galaxy that had started to believe the strong simply take. A pause. You asked why we are leaving. We are leaving because we came to stop a cruelty, and the cruelty is stopped, and there is nothing here we want. We never wanted anything here. We only wanted the veil quiet. It is quiet. Goodbye, Magistrate Orusel. You read your instrument correctly at the end, and you told your court the truth when the truth was the hardest thing to say, and that mattered. Look after them. Orusel found that he could not speak. The gray fleet drew back into the dark. The last courtesy was the last to go, holding its place at the center until all 40,000 of the others had folded away into the spaces between the stars, and then it, too, turned fully and slipped into the dark, and the throne fortress' unbending crown hung alone above its throne world, with its 11,000 ships arranged in 9 perfect rings around nothing at all, every weapon cold, every hull whole, every sailor alive, and the veil silent forever, and not one shot fired in the largest confrontation the galaxy had ever recorded. The whole thing had been broadcast on every band. The Empire had insisted on it, 4 days ago, when it meant to perform the breaking of humanity for the watching worlds. The watching worlds had seen everything. They had seen the demand to kneel. They had seen the one ship come alone. They had seen the veil fail. They had seen the gray fleet rise out of the empty dark. They had seen the Empire empty every weapon it had into nothing and touch nothing. They had seen a people stronger than the Meridian Empire ask only that one cruelty be stopped, and then take nothing and go home. 600 broken species watched the Meridian Empire's weapon go dark, and understood that it would never reach into their minds again, and many of them wept, and some of them, very quietly, began the long, slow work of being themselves again. In the days that followed, the messages came in to the throne fortress, on the same bands that had carried the demand to kneel, from the broken worlds and the free ones alike, and Orusel read them all, because no one else could bear to. They were not what the court expected. The court expected fury, the held rage of 600 peoples finally let off the leash, demands for reckoning, for the Empire's officials to be handed over, for the throne fortress to be pulled apart stone by stone. Some of that came, and it was deserved, and Orusel did not flinch from it. But most of what came was stranger and harder to bear. Most of it was the broken worlds asking carefully, not quite daring to believe it, whether the thing they had watched was real, whether the veil was truly off, whether the reaching that had lived in the back of their minds for 100 years, 1,000 years, the constant faint presence of the Empire editing what they were allowed to believe, was really, finally gone. They asked it the way a creature long in the dark asks whether the door is truly open, not yet trusting its own eyes, having learned the hard way that its eyes could be made to lie. And Orusel answered every one of them, in plain words, with no instrument behind the words, because there was no instrument any more. Yes, he wrote, it is off. It will not be rebuilt. You may believe your own minds again. I am sorry it was ever otherwise. He signed his own name to each, Magistrate Orusel of the 9th Perception Court, the court that had built and run the cruelty, so that the answer would carry the weight of coming from the very office that had wronged them. It was the smallest possible amends, and it was nearly all he had to give. And he gave it, over and over, for as long as the messages kept coming, which was years. He thought often, in those years, about why the humans had insisted the whole thing be broadcast. It had been the Empire's own demand, that day, that every band carry the breaking of humanity to the watching galaxy, and the humans had not only allowed it, they had needed it, had perhaps arranged the entire encounter around it. They could have stopped the veil quietly, they could have crossed the dark unseen, reached into the throne fortress and switched the instrument off in the night, and no one would ever have known how it was done. They had the strength to do it that way. They had chosen instead to do it in the brightest possible light, in front of 600 broken peoples and every free one besides, so that the watching galaxy would see, with its own eyes, the most feared weapon in its history fail against a smile, and then be set down by the hand that had wielded it. The humans had understood something the Empire never had. The Veil's true power had never been the instrument. It had been the belief in the instrument, the certainty in 600 peoples that resistance was pointless, that the Empire could reach into any mind it liked, that the strong simply took, and the weak simply knelt. You did not break that belief by switching off a machine in the dark. You broke it by showing the galaxy, in full light, that the machine could be beaten, and that the strong did not have to take. The humans had not come to destroy a weapon. They had come to kill a belief, and they had known that a belief could only be killed in front of witnesses. Magistrate Orusel lived 11 more years after that day. He spent them in the work of taking the veil apart, system by system, world by world, making certain the cruel old killing use could never be rebuilt, traveling to the worlds the Empire had broken to return what records could be returned, the true names, the true histories, the things the veil had edited out of 600 peoples. It was slow work, and most of it was thankless, and he was old, and he did it anyway, because a human ship had told him to look after them, and because he had spent 240 years being certain, and the one time his certainty had been broken open, he had found behind it something better than certainty, which was the simple wish to make right what could still be made right. There was a question that the court asked, in the quiet weeks after, the question that every defeated power asks, and Orusel was the one who answered it, because he had thought about it longest. The question was, how? Not how the humans had taken the systems. The court understood that now, the open doors of the veil and the doubting human minds. The deeper how. How a minor people on a small blue world, 900 years catalogued as unremarkable, had become strong enough to do this, and had hidden that strength so completely that the Empire's surveyors found a thin file and a poor fleet and never looked twice. And the answer Orusel gave the court was the answer he had read in the humans' own minds, in the one breath he had let himself spend in the channel, and it was not a comfortable answer, because it was not about weapons. The humans had not hidden a great secret weapon. They had hidden a great patience. Somewhere in those 900 years, the humans had received the Empire's broadcasts, the recordings of the breaking of the 600 worlds, transmitted on every band as a warning to the galaxy, and they had watched, and they had understood at once what the veil was, because they were a species that had always known their own senses could lie to them, and a weapon that lied to the senses was, to them, not a horror beyond comprehension, but a familiar danger seen clearly. And having understood it, they had made a decision, quietly, as a people, and kept it for 900 years. They had decided that the veil could not be allowed to continue. And then, instead of attacking, instead of warning, instead of doing any of the loud things a wronged people does, they had simply begun to prepare, slowly, carefully, across 9 centuries, learning the Empire's sacred tongue, reading the Empire's buried records, mapping the Empire's perception engines, building a fleet they hid behind their own modesty, and waiting, with the bottomless patience of a people who had decided what they would do and were content to take as long as it took to be able to do it without killing anyone. They had let the Empire catalog them as nothing. They had let the file stay thin. They had waited 900 years for the Empire to make the one mistake that would open the door. The mistake of pointing the veil at the one people in the galaxy it could not touch. And the Empire, on schedule, certain of itself, had made it, and the door had opened, and the humans had walked through it at last, unhurried, alone, speaking of manners. That was the answer, Orusel told the court. The humans had not beaten the Empire with a stronger weapon. They had beaten it with a longer patience and a clearer eye, and those, he had come to believe, were the only things that ever truly beat anyone, and the Empire had possessed neither, and had not even known they were things a people could possess. The court did not entirely understand, but Orusel wrote it down anyway, plainly, for whoever came after, because the humans had taught him that the truth was worth setting down even when no one was ready to hear it, especially then. He never saw the humans again. No one in the Empire did. The Greywater line went home to wherever home was, a place the Meridian Empire never found and never looked very hard for, and it did not return, because there was no reason to return, because the cruelty was stopped and the humans had wanted nothing else. In the records Orusel kept, in the long account he wrote so that no Meridian would ever forget what had been done and why it had been right that it could not continue, he set down everything he had seen, the demand and the failure and the empty gloves and the master switch and the leaving, all of it, in plain words so that it could not be edited later into something more flattering. And at the very end of the account, after the 11,000 ships and the 40,000 gloves and the silenced instrument and the fleet that took nothing and went home, he wrote down the one detail that he had never been able to explain and had never tried to, the image that had come back to him every day of those 11 years, the thing he saw whenever he closed his eyes. He thought, too, about the young signals officer who had wept and then stopped, and the 11,000 crews who had been shown the truth and had not broken, and the way the quiet had spread through the fleet that day, the strange, unfamiliar quiet of people being told the truth for the first time. In the years after, that quiet did not go away. The empire that survived the day was not the empire that had begun it. It had been shown its own crews the truth once, and once was enough, and the crews did not forget what it had felt like to see the dark with their own eyes and decide for themselves what was real. They did not want the lie back. None of them did. The veil was not rebuilt in the end, not only because the humans had forbidden it, and not only because Orusel took it apart, but because the Meridian people, having tasted 1 hour of being told the truth, discovered they could not stand to go back to the comfort of being deceived, even by their own. That was the humans' deepest work, and they had done it almost in passing, with a single refusal to let the Empire lie to its own frightened sailors. They had not just freed the 600 worlds, they had freed the Meridians too, from the thing the Meridians had done to everyone, themselves included, for 2,000 years. It was the first moment, before the reveal, before the empty ships, before the switch. The moment the Empire poured the most powerful perception weapon ever built into a single gray hull at full strength, in front of the entire galaxy, certain beyond all certainty that it was about to watch a human crew lose its mind. And the veil reached the human minds and delivered the lie perfectly, and the humans, surrounded by 11,000 ships, looked into the strongest cruelty the galaxy had ever made and saw it for exactly what it was, a lie. An old, tired lie told by a frightened people who had never learned any other way to be strong. They had not been afraid. They had not been angry. They had not even, in the end, been unkind. They had only smiled. And Magistrate Orusel, who had served the Meridian Empire for 240 years and had watched it set down its weapon and become, slowly and against everything in its nature, a better thing than it had been, understood at last that the smile had been the whole answer, offered in the first second, before a single shot or a single word, the complete and courteous reply of a people who knew exactly how the next hour would go, and had decided, out of nothing but their own free choosing, to be gentle about it. The Empire had challenged the Terran fleet, in front of the whole galaxy, with the cruelest weapon ever built, and humanity, surrounded 11,000 to 1, holding back a fleet that could have ended them all, had answered the challenge the way the strong answer the frightened when the strong have decided to be kind. It had only smiled, and then it had set them free, and then it had gone home, and the galaxy never forgot it, and that was the end of the cruelty, and the beginning of something better, and it had cost, in the end, not one single life.